Is he stealing the air too? That was the sentence someone whispered when the door creaked open and the wind dragged in a soaked man with trembling hands. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, wet, worn, a faded coat hanging off his shoulders, a paper bag clutched to his chest like it held the last thing he owned. No one offered help. No one made room. Most people just went back to their coffee, pretending not to notice. Except one. Marla Bennett didn't flinch. She stepped out from behind the counter, apron soaked, hair matted from the early shift, and stood in front of him. Quiet, still, like a shield made of breath and threadbare cotton. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the ceiling fan. "I'll find something warm." That's when the plate crashed. It hit the floor hard. Food scattered across the tiles. The silence afterward felt heavier than the sound. The owner didn't yell. He didn't have to. "You're done here," he said coldly. "Get out." But that was only the beginning. The story hadn't even started. "Thank you for being here." Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. Marla Bennett wasn't the kind of woman people remembered. She was the kind they forgot the moment she walked past. At 34, she'd become fluent in invisibility. In a town like Fairhill, Missouri, where most shops were boarded up and the post office still used carbon paper, being invisible was more than a choice. It was survival. She lived above Dave's Auto Repair in a room no bigger than a storage locker. The floor creaked. The walls switted in summer. There was one working outlet that sparked if you breathed on it wrong. She didn't have much. A chipped kettle. A photo of her grandfather folded into her wallet. And Smokey, a one-eyed rescue cat with a scar that curled around his jaw like a comma. Every morning at 500 a.m., Marla walked 2 miles to the diner through streets that hadn't seen new asphalt in over a decade. She opened the place before the sun came up, wiped down the counters, brewed the coffee. Most nights, she closed it too. No one ever asked why she worked so much. No one asked much of anything, but Marla had her reasons, and all of them traced back to one man, Henry Bennett. Henry had raised her after her parents vanished into one of those quiet family storms no one talks about in public. He was a Korean War veteran, stern on the outside, cornbread, soft on the inside, the kind of man who swept the porch even if no one was coming over. "Honor's not a speech," he used to say. "It's how you act when no one claps." When Henry passed 3 years ago, Marla didn't cry. She just went back to work. She lived frugally. She didn't complain. She kept her head down. Fairhill was the sort of place where kindness was admired from a distance, but no one wanted to get too close. Not anymore, not since the mill closed, not since the town grew quieter, poorer, colder. Marla didn't talk much, but she noticed everything. She noticed which customers always left pennies as tips and which ones glanced at the menu, even though they always ordered the same thing. She noticed when the dishwasher came in with fresh bruises he didn't explain. She noticed the men who came in from the rain and didn't meet her eyes, who only asked for water but looked like they hadn't eaten in days. She noticed the women who never smiled unless their husbands left the table. She noticed everything and kept it to herself. At night, she'd sit in her rented room, hold her grandfather's dog tags in one hand and Smokey's sleeping form in the other, and whisper, "We're okay. We're still okay." But the truth, she wasn't. She was tired, not just in her bones, in her soul, tired of pretending, tired of swallowing unfairness like cold coffee, tired of being polite to people who never said thank you. Then came the Tuesday night. It had been raining since noon, one of those spring storms that rattled downspouts and turned alleys into rivers. The diner was mostly empty. A couple of locals sat near the window, stirring their coffee slower than usual. A trucker watched a muted ball game. The door creaked open with a burst of wind that made everyone look up, and then look away. The man who entered was soaked to the bone. His coat, once military green, hung in tatters. A faded U.S. Army insignia clung to one sleeve like it was trying to disappear. His beard was patchy gray. His left leg dragged behind him, heavily bandaged. He held a paper bag tight to his chest, like it was made of glass. Marla had just finished scrubbing a stubborn ketchup stain from the countertop. She saw him pause in the doorway, uncertain. Not like someone looking for a table. Like someone searching for permission to exist. Most people went back to pretending he wasn't there. That was Fairhill's favorite sport. But Marla didn't pretend. She walked toward him, towel in hand. "Evelyn," she said gently, "can I get you something warm?" The man kept his eyes on the floor. When he finally looked up, she saw it in his face, pain and pride both fighting for space. "Just a cup of hot water, ma'am," he said. "And maybe a crust of bread, if it's headed for the trash." His voice cracked. Not from weakness, from the weight of having to ask. Marla didn't speak, but her chest tightened. She remembered her grandfather telling her a story about a night in Busan, 1952, when a stranger shared bread with him during the war. She nodded once. "I'll see what I can do." In the kitchen, someone had just returned a plate of chicken and dumplings. Untouched. She took it, replated it, added extra bread, poured a fresh mug of black coffee. When she brought it to the man, he looked stunned. "I can't pay," he whispered. "It's already paid for." She replied with a quiet smile. "And the coffee's on me." He stared at the tray for a long time, like it was a trap. Then his fingers wrapped around the mug slowly, carefully. "You remind me of my wife," he murmured. "She used to say warmth doesn't cost much, especially for people who've lived through too much." Cold, Marla blinked back tears. She didn't notice that the owner, Carl Haggerty, had been watching from the back. His eyes narrowed. His lips moved before his feet did. The storm outside got louder, but not louder than the voice that soon boomed through the diner. "What the hell do you think you're doing? What the hell do you think you're doing?" Carl Haggerty's voice cracked across the diner like a whip. He stood in the archway to the kitchen, thick arms crossed over his apron-stained chest. His eyes locked on the plate of food that now sat half empty in front of the soaked stranger. Marla didn't turn. She stayed where she was, beside the table, like her presence could hold off the storm building inside the man who signed her paychecks. He was a veteran. "Carl," she said softly. "He asked for hot water and bread. I gave him food that was going to be thrown out anyway." The few customers still inside froze. A middle-aged couple stopped stirring their coffee. No one said a word. No one looked up. "This ain't a soup kitchen, Marla," Carl snapped, louder now. "You want to give away food, do it on your own damn time. I paid for the coffee. You can take it out of my tips." Carl slammed his palm against the counter. It echoed like a gunshot. "I said no. You just made me look weak in front of paying customers." He pointed to the door, finger stiff and final. "You're fired. Pack your things, get out." Marla stood still for a moment. Not from fear, not from shame, but because her legs wouldn't move. Not from the weight of Carl's voice, but from the weight of everyone else's silence. The woman at table 3 leaned toward her husband and muttered, "That's what happens when you bring trouble inside." Someone else cleared their throat, went back to their phone. Marla reached behind her back, untied her apron slowly, folded it once. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Not here. Not now. Outside, the rain was still falling sideways. Her canvas shoes soaked through within seconds. She stood under the diner's faded awning shivering. But her spine was straight, just like Henry taught her. Then a rustle. From the alley, the veteran emerged again, moving slowly, leaning on the wall with one hand. "I saw what happened," he said. His voice was gravel and gravel alone. "I shouldn't have let you pay that price." Marla shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong." He stepped closer, fumbled into his coat pocket, and pressed something into her palm. It was a tarnished dog tag. The chain was frayed. The name nearly faded. "You reminded me I wasn't invisible," he said. Then, without waiting for a reply, he turned and vanished into the storm. That night, Marla sat in her room above the auto shop. The wet apron hung over a chair. Smokey curled beside her hip. She refreshed her bank account. $42. Rent was due in 10 days, no job, no safety net, no insurance, no backup plan. But something felt different, like she'd done something that mattered. even if no one else noticed. She held the dog tag in her hand, tracing the name. Turner, E.J., serial number mostly worn away. She wondered who he was, where he had served, what he had lost, and how a country could forget someone like that so easily. The next morning, Fairhill changed. It didn't know it yet, but it had already begun. At 6:45 a.m., the town was still wrapped in fog. Most people were still asleep. Traffic lights blinked yellow over empty intersections. The scent of wet pavement filled the air. Then the rumble began. Not from thunder, not from engines, from presence. One by one, black SUVs pulled onto Main Street. They parked in perfect sequence outside the diner. Then the first door opened. A man stepped out, tall, commanding, clean, shaven with a face carved from decades of duty. His coat bore a single row of medals, and his shoulders carried a weight heavier than steel. He paused in front of the diner, removed his hat, and waited. Then, from side streets and sidewalks, they came. Rows and rows of soldiers, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, each in full dress uniform, each standing silently in formation. By the time the sun burned through the last layer of cloud, the street was full. 200 men and women, standing still outside a diner that had fired a waitress for feeding a veteran. Inside, Carl Haggerty was restocking napkin dispensers. When the door opened, the bell jingled softly. Carl looked up and froze. The man who entered wore a U.S. Army dress uniform with silver eagles on his shoulders. "I'd like to speak to the owner," the man said. Carl cleared his throat. "I am the owner." "My name is Colonel Matthew Turner," the man said. "Son of Ellie Turner." Carl's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "The man you humiliated here yesterday," Colonel Turner continued, "is the reason I'm alive." The room went quiet. Even the fryer stopped bubbling. "In 2007, during my third tour in Iraq," the colonel continued, "our convoy was hit. 12 of us were pinned down, wounded, bleeding, afraid. Your beggar carried me 3 miles under enemy fire. Shrapnel in his leg. Didn't take treatment until we were all safe." He reached into his coat and pulled out a laminated citation. "The Silver Star. It's his. He sold it years ago to buy food for a homeless family." Carl stepped backward. No one helped him. No agency found him. No veteran program. No city official. The colonel's voice cracked slightly. "But a waitress did. A waitress you fired." From outside, a corporal entered the diner holding a small black case. Inside was the Silver Star. Colonel Turner took it and turned to the door. "Bring her here," he said. Marla was in her room when the knock came. A local reporter stood breathless, with a camera crew behind her. "They're asking for you," she said. "The soldiers. The whole block is shut down." Marla thought it was a mistake. A prank. A dream. But when she arrived, it was very real. The crowd parted. 200 soldiers raised their hands in salute. To her, a waitress. A quiet girl who had done one kind act when no one was watching. Colonel Turner stepped forward. "My father wanted you to have this," he said, presenting the medal. "I can't." Marla whispered, "It's not mine." He gently placed it into her hand. "It is now." The applause didn't last long. The internet moved faster than honor. By noon, the video had gone viral. A grainy clip, taken by a teenager from behind a napkin dispenser, captured everything: Marla offering food, Carl shouting, the moment she took off her apron. And the next day the storm began. Not the kind with thunder. The kind with comment sections. She broke the rules. Should have asked first. But this isn't the first time she's done it. Entitled waitstaff always think they're heroes. They didn't know her name yesterday. Now they dragged it through hashtags like it owed them something. Her coworkers unfriended her. One even messaged, "Always trying to be the hero. How's that working out now?" Marla applied to 3 diners that afternoon. No one called back. At one place, the manager, a wary man with tobacco breath, looked up from her RA and paused. "You were on the video, right?" His voice softened, but not kindly. "We can't risk the attention, honey. Nothing personal." At the next place, they didn't even let her finish the application. The manager slid it back to her, then nodded toward the door. No words. Just that smile people wear when they want to pretend they're being polite while asking you to disappear. By sundown, Marla was walking the edge of downtown, coat zipped against the cold, dog tags still in her pocket like a stone. She passed the bus shelter. Curled beneath a torn trash bag was Ellie Turner, his back to the wall, arms crossed tightly around that same paper bag. Marla knelt beside him. She unwrapped a sandwich, half of one she'd saved from earlier, and placed it in his hand. "You remembered me," he said. "I couldn't forget," she replied. She didn't stay long. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked away before her knees gave out. Neither of them noticed the black military SUV parked at the corner. Inside, someone in uniform was watching and dialing a number. The rain stopped just before dawn. Fairhill woke up scrubbed clean but not quiet. At 1600 a.m., Main Street buzzed, not with traffic but with tension. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Phones hovered in the air. Cameras blinked red lights across the pavement. The diner stayed closed. Its neon sign flickered, then died. Veteran groups arrived by the dozen. One taped a sign to the front window. TSPLACACR coffee ici sarvit hinar. Suppliers pulled out. Carl disappeared within the week. Some said he sold the place and moved to Florida. Others said he just drove until the road ran out. Marla never posted, never gave interviews, never gloated. She simply went quiet. But silence has weight, and people remembered how she carried it. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a note. "You fed a man the world forgot. You reminded my unit what our uniforms used to mean. Come see what we're building." Folded within it was a card. The Ridgewell Foundation Veteran Community Outreach, Director CPEAT, Joanna Reese-Rett, and below that, scrawled in pen, "We could use someone like you." The job came with no fanfare. Just a warehouse converted into a kitchen. Once used for vending machine storage, now filled with the scent of cornbread and chili. They offered her the role of program manager. Marla hesitated. She didn't have credentials, didn't have a degree. But Captain Reese just smiled and said, "You've got more than that. You've got the kind of heart that shows up when it's hard." And so, it began. Slowly, quietly, with Marla at the center, apron tied again, but this time by choice. She served coffee beside retired nurses, plated food next to teenage volunteers, swept floors with men who once flew helicopters. The kitchen became more than a shelter, it became a rhythm, one made from real hands, real stories, and real warmth. Smokey, her cat, claimed the sun-east windowsill and became the kitchen's unofficial mascot. They gave him a bandana with a tiny star patch stitched on the side. No one dared remove it. Then, one afternoon, just after 400 p.m., the door creaked open again. A boy, no more than 8 years old, sandy hair, freckles, shoes too big for his feet. In one hand a dollar bill folded in thirds. In the other a cookie wrapped in wax paper, tied with string. He walked to the counter and placed both items down. "I saw you in the video," he said. "My grandpa was a soldier, too. He used to help people. I wanted to help someone, too." Marla knelt. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Can I use this to help someone else?" He nodded hard. "Okay." She didn't say anything more, just placed her hand over her heart, the same way 200 soldiers had done. Ely Turner now lived in VA housing, warm-fed, cared for. Sometimes his son visited. Sometimes younger soldiers came just to sit and listen to his stories. He told them not just about Iraq, but about a Tuesday evening, and a waitress who made space when no one else would. The Ridgewell Community Kitchen didn't open with headlines. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no mayor's speech, no reporters scrambling for quotes. It opened with a pot of stew, a folding chair, a single bell above the door that jingled when someone new walked in. Marla hung her coat every morning on the same hook, tied her apron, checked the pantry, counted loaves of bread like they were treasure. She didn't ask for attention, didn't want it. The world had already watched her stand up once. She wasn't trying to stand out again. But stories like hers, they don't disappear. They echo. Through side conversations in grocery stores, in teachers using her name during lessons on empathy, in churches placing donation jars near the coffee urn. Her name wasn't trending anymore, but it had settled into something stronger, a quiet kind of trust. A waitress who gave without asking, who stood tall in the rain, who didn't flinch when the world looked away. Veterans called her Miss Marla. Volunteers called her Boss. Kids just called her the lady with the soup. She never corrected any of them. The box beside her desk held 3 items: a silver star in velvet, a dog tag dull and worn, and a folded American flag. She never showed them to anyone. But every now and then, when the day ran long and the room was finally quiet, she'd open the lid. Just for a moment. Just to remember. It was a Thursday night when Ely came back. He wore a clean coat now. His beard was trimmed. His eyes still tired, but steady. He stepped through the kitchen side door like it was a chapel. No announcement. No applause. Just Marla, wiping down a counter, glancing up, and nodding. They didn't say much. They never had to. But before he left, he placed something beside the bread basket. A photograph. It showed a younger Ely, covered in dust, blood on his arm, carrying a wounded soldier through sand. Behind it, a single line scribbled in black ink. They always remember the flag, but I remember the plate of food. In time, people moved on. The headlines faded. The video sank lower and lower in feeds. Fairhill found new things to gossip about. But those who had really seen what happened, who had watched Marla step forward that night, they didn't forget. Because they knew. She didn't march. She didn't protest. She didn't shout. She just fed a man the world had stopped seeing. And somehow that was enough to wake an entire town. A year passed. Then 2. The diner stayed closed, its windows still boarded. The sign, open 24 hours, long since peeled to rust. But across town, the warehouse stayed bright. Kids brought canned goods from school fundraisers. Retired soldiers taught cooking classes. Single parents came to sit, not just eat. It was no longer just a kitchen. It was a map, a message, a mirror. A place where people who had fallen between the cracks could find their footing again. Then, one spring morning, Marla opened the kitchen to find something on the doorstep, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, inside a new apron, embroidered on the pocket, "Keep feeding them." No note, no name, just 3 initials stitched in the bottom corner, ET. That night, she sat on her porch with Smokey curled on her lap. She held the dog tag again, ran her fingers over its edge. She could still hear her grandfather's voice, rough, gravelly, kind. Honor isn't loud, Marla. It's not parades or speeches. It's sweeping the porch even when no one's coming. She whispered to the wind, "We're okay. We're still okay." And this time, she believed it. This story isn't about a waitress, or a veteran, or a diner. It's about us. It's about what we choose when no one's watching. About how the smallest gestures, a plate of food, a warm coffee, a moment of eye contact, can remind someone that they are still seen. We live in a world that rewards volume. But courage, real courage, it whispers. And sometimes it wears an apron. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment like Marla's? Have you ever stood up for someone when it wasn't easy? Maybe you didn't have an audience. Maybe you never got a medal. But those moments, they matter. They are the threads that hold our communities together. If you have a story like that, big or small, we'd love to hear it. Share it in the comments below. Because you never know who needs to hear it today. And if this story touched your heart, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Here on our channel, we tell true, hearted stories for those who haven't forgotten what dignity means. Because some heroes don't wear uniforms. Some just carry a plate to a stranger.